The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to listen to Jesus. But the Pharisees and scribes began to complain, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So to them Jesus addressed this parable. A man had 2 sons, and the younger son said to his father, "Father, give me the share of your estate that should come to me." So the father divided the property between them. After a few days, the younger son collected all his belongings and set off to a distant country, where he squandered his inheritance on a life of dissipation. When he had freely spent everything, a severe famine struck that country, and he found himself in dire need. So he hired himself out to one of the local citizens, who sent him to his farm to tend the swine. And he longed to eat his fill of the pods on which the swine fed, but nobody gave him any. Coming to his senses, he thought, "How many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat? But here am I, dying from hunger. I shall get up and go to my father, and I shall say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would treat one of your hired workers.' So he got up and went back to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father caught sight of him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But his father ordered his servants, 'Quickly bring the finest robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Take the fattened calf and slaughter it. Then let us celebrate with a feast, because this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found.' Then the celebration began. Now the older son had been out in the field, and on his way back, as he neared the house, he heard the sound of music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what this might mean. The servant said to him, 'Your brother has returned, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf, because he has him back safe and sound.' He became angry, and when he refused to enter the house, his father came out and pleaded with him. He said to his father in reply, 'Look, all these years I served you, and not once did I disobey your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat to feast on with my friends. But when your son returns, who swallowed up your property with prostitutes, for him you slaughter the fattened calf.' He said to him, 'My son, you are here with me always. Everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and rejoice, because your brother was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Good morning. Welcome. Welcome to any visitors or guests here for the first time, and welcome to those joining us through the live stream. American writer Mark Twain once famously said, "When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished at how much the old man had learned in 7 years." In a humorous way, he was speaking of wisdom. Wisdom is the power of discerning and judging properly to what is right and what is true. Now, to some degree, we all think we have this power of discernment, that we're wise, that we know how to judge what is true and what is right. But Mark Twain was also exposing a certain irony in our self-perceived wisdom. All the while we think we're being wise, we quite possibly are being the opposite. There's every possibility we are instead being delusional. Now, delusions are firm and false beliefs that contradict reality. To be delusional is to persist in believing things which are not true. Now, the younger son, the prodigal son, shows us one kind of delusional thinking. Like Mark Twain's 14-year-old boy, the prodigal is naive. To be naive is simply to lack life experience, true wisdom, and good judgment. He thinks he knows how the world works and is determined to set off and take his rightful place in it. Ironically, he thinks it's his family that's naive. The way of life he's been brought up in is suffocating and not right for him. So he rebels against his father and sets off for a distant land. But while he thinks he's being wise in this decision, he's really doing the opposite. He acts hastily without serious deliberation regarding his future. He disregards and dishonors his father. And he separates himself from the relationships of family and friends. And he proceeds to make a long string of bad decisions that eventually land him in the pig pen. Now, the older son shows us another kind of delusional thinking. He is self-righteous. To be self-righteous is to be certain that you're totally correct or morally superior. He thinks he knows how the world works, and he believes that he's always been that model son. He follows the family rules and adheres to the laws of tradition. He works hard in his father's fields, secure in the knowledge that he will get his just rewards. But while he thinks he's being wise, he too is really doing the opposite. When their father embraces his returning younger brother, the prodigal son, the older son immediately becomes jealous and angry and bitter. In contrast to his younger brother, he feels that he's been treated unfairly. His crushed pride and wounded ego reveal an underlying self-centeredness and self-righteousness. He begins to praise himself, to list the right ways that he's labored in life and how he's failed to receive his just rewards. He forgets the many times that he has been forgiven over the years. And his self-image includes no genuine love or respect for his father. Now, right in the midst of the story of the two delusional sons, Jesus places the contrasting wisdom of the father. While the prodigal's away, the father grieves for the son that he's lost. After all the years of prayers and holding this child in his arms, after teaching him how to hunt and to fish, after pouring out an ocean of love, suddenly the father is left with a huge hole in his heart. Words cannot express the pain, the sadness, the loss he feels. His son has left home, and no one can console him. Day after day, the father watches for his son. Night after night, he waits for his return. Then one day, he sees a figure walking hesitantly toward him. He runs to meet his son, embraces him, throws his arms around him, and kisses him. Even though the boy must have smelled like a pigsty and wore tattered clothes on his back, the father lavishes his affection on him. The nervous son's fear melts away in the tears and hugs. One broken heart speaks to another. Likewise, with the older son, the father comes out in search of him. And when he finds him, he doesn't scold, berate, or rebuke him harshly. He tells the son that everything the father has is available to him. All he has to do is ask. In this story, Jesus shows us the wisdom of God, the eternal power of discerning and judging properly what is true and right. He paints a picture of the abundant mercy God the Father pours out on repentant sinners. He doesn't just parcel it out a little bit at a time. He dumps the whole load at once, instantly. The repentant sinner is totally and freely forgiven. All our sins are blotted out. You don't have to brace yourself for the big lecture about how stupid you've been. There's no finger wagging or I told you so. There's only grace and mercy and love poured out on us as we are welcomed into God's presence as his children. He clothes us with the robe of Christ's righteousness and gives us the full privileges of sons and daughters, sharing in the best of all that is his. He lets us know that he's not only glad, but he's overjoyed that we have returned to him. That's how God responds when we turn from our sins, when we come to our senses, when in the midst of our delusions, we experience that eureka effect. That is when the light bulb goes on and we suddenly recognize the truth. We have what's called an aha moment. The thing about an aha moment is that you think you've never thought of something in life that way before, but you can't really have an aha moment unless you already knew it. An aha is the remembering of something you already know. Perhaps the wisdom of God planted deep within your heart. Human life is in some way a constant returning to the Father's house. God is waiting for us, just like in the story of the two delusional sons, with open arms, even though we don't deserve it. It doesn't matter how large our debt is. God's love is able to reach down to every prodigal son, into every human misery, and to lift us out of every form of sin. When we receive this mercy, we don't feel humiliated, but rather found again. And when the lost are found, heaven throws a big celebration. Whenever guilt is kissed away by God's grace, heaven goes wild. So come into the banquet. Take a seat at the table of grace. Bask in the eternal wisdom of the Father. And come home to where you belong.